my session is what's new in Nuxt 3. How many people are already using Nuxt? A couple? Are you still on Nuxt 2? Still on Nuxt 2? Okay. So a little bit about me. My name is JD Hillen. I am a software engineer 2, whatever that means, at Garmin, which is located in Kansas City. We're a wearables and GPS company for boats and planes and cars and all kinds of cool stuff. So I work on their product, device registration management, and subscription management teams. So if you do own one of our products, you've interfaced with the stuff that I work on. If not, you should buy one. They're pretty cool. I live by this credo below that there are 3 things in life: code, coffee, and metal. I'm a huge music nerd. I drink coffee all day long, and if I'm not doing like family stuff, I am at a show randomly in Kansas City trying to get my music career back on track, which isn't happening. But so anyway, that's about me. So what is Nuxt? Nuxt is a framework for developing Vue applications. And you may be asking yourself, wait a second, isn't Vue a framework? It is. Vue is a framework and Nuxt is a framework. It's called a meta framework. So meta frameworks are basically frameworks built on top of frameworks that let JavaScript developers focus on the what, and then the application actually takes care of the how for you. So this next slide, here's a couple examples of some meta frameworks. You probably have seen some of these out there before. Next.js, Gatsby, and Remix are all React ones. Vue has Nuxt, VuePress, and Gridsome. Svelte has SvelteKit, Elder.js, and Jungle.js. But even though most of these meta frameworks differ from each other in various ways, there are certain key features that are similar between them. So most of them do static site generation, server-side rendering, code splitting, routing, which we'll cover later, and data fetching, which we'll also cover later, and serverless architecture, or Jamstack. So if you have a project that is already deployed to like Vercel or Netlify, you're already doing serverless, so congratulations. So first thing we're going to talk about is static site generation. So static site generation, or SSG, or pre-rendering, whatever it's called, I just call it static site generation. So what that is that if you want your site to look the same for every visitor, meaning there's no dynamic content, then server-side generation is the way to go. Basically, the framework will generate static HTML pages for each one of your routes that has been defined. And using static site generation, you could cut down on the amount of time and data sent to the client and improve your load times throughout your site. So server-side rendering, on the opposite side, if let's say you have a site that has a lot of dynamic content or customized content based on your visitor, then server-side rendering would probably be the way to go. Your pages are built on the server when they are requested through a URL, and they arrive to the client as a fully formed HTML file. So one of the cool things that Nuxt 3 is doing, it's called hybrid rendering. Typically what you'll do when you do static site generation or server-side generation, that's called a universal renderer. So that will just, you set that variable, and is that still blinking? It's really annoying, I'm sorry. I didn't do that. That's not part of the presentation. So, but anyway, so that's called universal rendering. You'll set it to static site generation or server-side generation, and it'll just do that for every page. But one of the cool things with hybrid rendering is that sometimes you want more fine-grained control over the rendering. So certain pages would be static site generated, some of them would be server-side generated, and this example up here is kind of a way that you can set that in your defined Nuxt config. So like, let's say that first one right there is a blog. So it's SWR equals true, so all of those would be dynamic. The articles would be static, and you can follow that down the line. You can choose between static, server-side generation, SPA, or universal, and you can just set everything to SSG if you want to. So that's one of the cool new features. Code splitting. This is another kind of feature of a meta framework. So code splitting is the splitting of code into various bundles or components that can be loaded or demanded on in parallel. So if you have a page that uses 5 components, then the JS file that's generated will only load those 5 components for that page. Kind of cuts down on trying to load every single thing in your app all at once. Just makes things faster. Okay, so here are the headlines. Nuxt currently is in version 3 RC, which is just release candidate, and that was as of 5 days ago. I will talk a little bit about this later, but there is an event coming up next week called Nuxt Nation, and they haven't made an official announcement yet, but they did say there will be at least 1 or 2 more releases before the version 3.0 stable candidate comes out, and it's probably going to come out next week at Nuxt Nation, which is an online event. It's totally free, so I would definitely suggest checking that out if you are interested in Nuxt. It's going to be a very, very cool event, and I think Daniel over here is presenting at it. Yes? Yeah, there you go. So if you have any next questions, talk to him. Don't talk to me. So here are kind of the headlines that we're going to talk about. We got Vue 3, Vite, TypeScript, performance, Nitro, bundles, the composition API, the Nuxt CLI, and suspense. So first off, we got Vue 3. Nuxt 3 is completely rebuilt with Vue 3 in mind. So you get all of those Vue 3 enhancements in Nuxt. Vue 3 came out, about 2 years ago, I believe. And the adoption rate is still a little slow. For me personally, I like to use the latest and greatest stuff on all my personal projects. So I like using these release candidates and the Vue 3 composition API and all the things that come with that. But at my company that I work, they're a large corporate company. Things do not move as fast, and adoption rates are a lot slower. So we are in that process of moving over to Vue 3 first. We're still using the options API. We'll eventually get to the composition API, but there's a lot of other opinions than just mine in that company. So we are moving in that direction, and Vue 3 is a big part of that. So next thing, Vite. I'm sure if you are in the Vue community, you have heard of Vite. You probably used it in several apps. It is lightning fast. I love it. I absolutely loathe Webpack. I hate configuring that thing. I've been dealing with it for several years, and I don't like it anymore. And Vite has just completely killed it for me. So, and what's the other one that just came out? TurboPack or something? I'm not going to look at that. I like Vite. So Nuxt 3 uses Vite by default. So we get all of those benefits of using Vite. Now, in Nuxt 3, you can use Webpack if you want to. It's still supported. But as me and the rest of the Vue community, we definitely think you should check out Vite and move your projects to that. It also makes it more of a straightforward when writing tests. You can use vtest along with Vite and take advantages of all the other incredible work that the Vite team has been putting out. So next up, TypeScript. How many TypeScript people do we have? 1, 2, 3. Okay, we got a couple. I am not a TypeScript guy. I see the benefit of it, and I've got a guy on my team that's like TypeScript, all the things. But we'll get there eventually. But Vue 3 and Nuxt 3 have all been rewritten in TypeScript, so you can fully type your code base. And a fully typed code base prevents mistakes and documents the API usage. It just makes things a lot easier. I'm tired of digging through Swagger docs from our API team and trying to figure out what the hell they were trying to figure out. And I can just use TypeScript and do that. It is optional. You don't have to use it, but it is there. So performance. I know when upgrading my projects to Vue 3 and Vite, the performance is one of the big factors in that decision. So right now, according to their website, It's up to 75% smaller server deployments and smaller client bundle targeting modern browsers. So we don't have to worry about those old browsers anymore, but 75% smaller server deployments is a huge deal. The Vue Virtual DOM has been rewritten from the ground up and allows for better rendering performance. On top of that, when working with single file components, the Vue compiler can further optimize them at build time by separating static and dynamic markup, which is also a really cool feature. Optimized cold starts and or with dynamic server code splitting powered by Nitro, which we'll talk about Nitro here in a minute. So it's super fast and just a joy to work with. So Nitro. Nitro is the engine that kind of powers Nuxt 3. So it has cross-platform support, for Node.js, browsers, service workers, and more. It has serverless support out of the box, which is really cool because I like using Netlify. I can just push it up to GitHub and let Netlify take care of the rest for automatic deployments. It has API route support, which is really cool. Automatic code splitting and async loading chunks, which is also really cool. Hybrid mode for static and serverless sites, and development servers for hot module reloading, which is one of the main reasons why I like Vite so much. Yeah. So I know they use Rollup for all of that. I would check that out. I'm not an expert in that. So speaking of smaller bundles, one of most of Vue's functionality is tree shakeable, which is also really cool. So it doesn't load those files that you don't necessarily need. And your production bundle will not include those if you don't use them. So the composition API. Now, I originally had a talk about the composition API. I got bumped for somebody else, which I'm not bitter about at all. But the composition API is really cool, and there's some really cool features that I'll be going over here in a minute that utilize the composition API. How many people have already switched over like completely to the composition API? Nope. One, maybe one. He's teaching it. He's cheating. Oh, okay. Yeah, fair enough. So if you haven't looked into the composition API and all the benefits of that, I seriously would talk to some people around here. We've got a great Vue community here about the composition API and how those different features of the composition API are superior than the options API. And later on in the talk, I'll go over some of those features that Nuxt 3 is implementing. So, like I said, it utilizes the composition API, but the options API is still usable. So you can still use that if you want to. But with the composition API, it allows for greater flexibility and less unnecessary markup. One of the other cool features is the Nuxt CLI. So there's a new Nuxt CLI. It has 0 dependencies. So it doesn't have to install a whole bunch of stuff, and it makes for easy scaffolding and module integration. So if you're not one of those people that just likes to go file new and create all that stuff, there is a CLI that will scaffold those things for you. And again, this is an optional tool. You don't have to use it all the time. Okay, so this next part of the talk is my favorite Nuxt 3 features. There are certain things that I've highlighted here, and we can talk about them at length, but the first one is this file-based routing. So routing is defined through the file structure of your app, just like Nuxt 2, but Nuxt 3 takes it to a little bit of a bigger level. So for any page that you want to create, you have your pages directory. It's easy to find where the code lives. So you don't have to be looking in all of these different modules and components to try to find out where your page information is living. It also uses Vue Router under the hood, and you can always hook into that at any time if necessary. But Nuxt 3 pretty much takes care of building those routes for you. So here's kind of an example. Can you guys see that? Is that big enough? This is an example of a site that I've been working on. And like most people, I've been rebuilding my website for like the last 20 years. And Nuxt 3 is just the latest iteration of that journey for me. It's a small site. I don't post to it a lot, but it has a couple different features. So you can see in this pages directory, you've got the index, you've got an about, you've got talks, uses, basic things. But I wanted to create a blog and start blogging a little bit. So you create a folder, call it whatever you want, and it'll give it that route. And then you put an index.view inside of that folder, and that would be your default blog view. But that file that's right above index that says slug, it has the brackets around it, says slug. So that would be a dynamic page that you would create and use that slug as a parameter in your URL to manipulate and do whatever data that you want to show it. So let's say I have a slug name of my awesome blog post. So the URL that would be generated would be, your website URL /blog/my awesome blog post. So that's one of the big features that I really like, is that you don't have to go through and create all these routes and worry about the router. Like, it just does it for you. So the next thing, auto imports. This is a really cool feature. So Nuxt 3 only imports the code that we're actually using, so there's no performance hit. Why clutter up your beautiful code with unnecessary boilerplate? And that's part of the reason why I switched to the composition API, because you're getting rid of a lot of that boilerplate code that honestly just isn't necessary. So when I say auto imports, Nuxt auto imports functions and composables to perform data fetching, app context, runtime config, manage state, and define components and plugins. So you can see right here, I've got a site header component, I've got a site footer component, and there's no imports there. It just automatically picks those up. So you don't have to import every single component that you're pulling in. Now, Nuxt layout and Nuxt page are Nuxt specific components that you can use to display your pages, but there's no reason to import it. So how this does it is directory-based auto imports. So the three things and the three folders that are highlighted here, you've got components, you've got composables, and you've got your layouts. Those three, any file that's in there is automatically imported into your application. So that's directory-based auto imports. The next thing, they have view-specific auto imports. So reactivity APIs like ref, reactive, computed, and watch, those are all imported for you. Lifecycle hooks, same thing, on before mount, on mounted, and on updated. Pretty much all of those, they're all auto imported. So this is an example, it's just a count, and then there's a computed property that doubles that count. I don't have to import ref, I don't have to import computed, it just automatically does it for me. So one of the other cool things that I really like about Nuxt 3 is the built-in composables. Things like use head, use route, use state, use cookie. Pretty much, did anybody catch Jess's talk on composables earlier? No? Oh, you should talk to her. She knows a lot about composables. Specifically, there's a library called View Use. That's kind of a standard library in order to do composables or mix-ins as they've evolved from them. But they're basically chunks of reusable code that you can use throughout your app. And I'll go over a couple of those here in a sec. But View Use is a really great library to add composable functions to your site. So this is an example of use fetch. So first argument in there, I have a route, so use route, even though we're trying to get the route name for this API call. So use route in and of itself is a composable, so you can get that route. Use runtime config, same thing. That's the way that you use to import environment variables into your application. And then, so technically I'm using 3 composables here. And then the data is using one called useFetch, which automatically makes that API call. I tack in the API base, I tap in the route name, and that hits my API that I built to pull in that page data. So I'm using 3 composables here, all just to get one URL. Now, of course, I could just copy and paste that into one URL and not have to use a router API base, but I like to have it all in the same place because I can then turn this chunk of code into a composable and reuse that in multiple places. So here's basically the same thing, but we're making multiple calls with useFetch. Now, if you set data, here, actually, let me go back. If you have this data attribute here and you create another constant and call it something else, but use useFetch and await that, your API calls are gonna fail. So one of the ways around that is doing this, is actually making a promise all and using those useFetch composables to generate your page data and your blog posts and things like that. So you're making multiple calls with useFetch. This is another really cool feature is the useHead. So one of the big things about Nuxt is that it optimizes your meta tags and your SEO optimization, so you don't have to sit there and copy and paste it for every single page. This is an exact example of me trying to pull in page data that I have on an API and then display that in useHead. So it automatically ports your metadata that you generate into the head of whatever page it's on. So the first couple lines are just my API calls. I have an error catch in there just to make sure that if the data if it comes back and there's nothing in that object, that it just 404s, basically meaning the page doesn't exist. But then I create a meta object. I pass the title, the description, and an image, because that's really all you need. And then I pass that into this get metadata. And actually, after Jess's talk, I need to rename this of use metadata and not get metadata. That's the proper way to do it. But I was in a hurry and I just did it this way. So we're using that metadata, we're passing it into that composable, and then passing the results of that back to useHead, and that generates the meta tags for everything. So here's a look at that get metadata object. Now, there's a lot of different metadata that you got to do: title, description, and then there's open graph metadata that you would use for like Facebook. There's a lot of sites that use open graph. And then, of course, there's Twitter that they have to have their own meta tags. So basically, I turn this into a reusable function that just generates all this information for me. The meta title is used in a couple different places. The meta description is used in a couple places. The meta image is used in a couple places. And I didn't want to have to copy and paste this across every single page of my application. So turned it into a composable and used that. Actually, sorry, I'm gonna kind of lean over here. So this is an example of the app that I've been building for a while. You've got this pages directory that has pretty much all these are individual pages, and the index, you can see that fetch, meta, and then obviously putting the meta tags in there. Now the API that I wrote actually, it stores markup language and then returns HTML that's automatically converted and then just populates on a page. So I do have this chunk of code in multiple places because the pages are pretty much the same. Honestly, I haven't quite figured out how to manipulate that into just one function and have dynamic pages. So if there's anybody out there that might want to talk about that, I'm all ears. But those are pretty much the same. Same for the blog posts. This just pulls in the API call of blogs and then displays the blog name. Now there's only one currently and it's just a test post. But once you click on that, it takes you to this slug page, which actually generates the post. Now you'll notice that like a lot of these pages are using the exact same language and the exact same code. But again, there's no imports. It's all just dumbed down and I'm only using what is necessary for the page to render. Okay, let's get rid of this. So there are a lot of great resources when you're learning about Nuxt. Like I said, Nuxt Nation is November 16th and 17th next week. You can go to nuxtnation.com. View Mastery is another great site that has a lot of Nuxt information. I will pimp View School because Daniel's here. And I do have a subscription to both of these sites because I want all the information. I don't just want one side, I want everything. So View School is a really great tool to learn about Nuxt and Nuxt 3. Mastering Nuxt, which actually just came out, I want to say 2 weeks ago, is a great course that Michael Thiessen is doing. And it basically goes over a lot of these different resources and how to use Nuxt, Nuxt 3. Does anybody have any questions? I kind of blew through all that, sorry. I'm just really excited. I'm really excited for Nuxt 3 to come out because I've used several different frameworks. I've used WordPress, I've used Astro, I've used all these different things. I'm a Vue developer at heart, and just the fact that I can get something up and running super quickly without a lot of configuration and a lot of boilerplate just makes my life a lot easier. And so, I don't know, it's just really great. So, yeah.
Did you use Nuxt 2 before, like any building process?
So I started building the site in Nuxt 2, and then I think the first release candidate came out, and I was like, because like I said, I'm a latest and greatest guy. I want to use all the cool new features. I scrapped the whole thing and just went with Nuxt 3. So I've been kind of playing with these release candidates, over the last 6 to 8 months. And every once in a while, like a feature will break, and I'm like, oh, don't worry about it. They'll fix it. They'll fix it later. And then like a week later, they'll release a new candidate, and everything's fine. So I think I saw a tweet yesterday that there are, I think, 1,200 like Nuxt 3 applications in production right now, and they're still using the release candidate. So, there's a little bit to be said about that. So, but yeah, that's pretty much my time. Thank you, and go build something awesome. If you want to see the slides or stalk me on social media or any of that stuff, you just go to links.jdhillen.com. It's got all the information on there. And yeah, if you want to talk Vue 3 and Nuxt stuff, come find me. Thank you. Nice.
I pushed to Netlify and my site was down.
Oh no.
I'm clearly still doing something wrong. I reverted a commit and I'm back live, but it's nice to know it did not have an SSR build problem. I broke something else, so I'll have to find out. But I was really excited.
It's always something. I see that, and actually, I didn't talk about this, but if you look at the package JSON, like I'm using Nuxt and Sass, and that's it.
Yeah, nice.
It's got Vite already built into it. It's got, Vue 3 is already imported into it. Like it just boils everything down. Like, and here I'll show you an example.
Mine's Nuxt and Hillen. So yeah, it's the same.
Let's see. I'm not going to show you the code because I'll probably get fired for this.
Oh, so you're just going to show us how much a dependency is in a production app with Garmin? A lot of scripts.
So a lot of these are just built-in dependency, like, different components and things that we built. But I mean, all of this stuff, and there are certain things that we do need, like ESLint, but if you're building something for now, like you can literally get away with 2 dependencies and that's it, and build everything from there. Now you don't even need the Sass either. Like that's just a personal preference that I just like building with Sass. But
my project, it says Nuxt 3 and Tailwind. It's the same sort of speed feedback on style.
right now, and let's take a look at this. So this is this stupid links page. Like everybody's seen those social media links, like link in bio, and it's just got a bunch of, that's all it is. I just built one for myself because I didn't like any of the other ones. But even this, you could do with Nuxt 3 and only have like 2 dependencies. I just built this first before I started playing in Nuxt. So, but yeah, the dependencies are definitely an advantage of Nuxt 3, that you don't have to do all of that extra stuff.
It's crazy just how quick everything was. So lightweight and slim down.
I was gonna say, I should switch this back to mirror view so I can actually so I can actually see what I'm doing and not. See now this thing. Damn it. Who's William? Okay, there we go. Now I can actually see what I'm doing here. So let's start up a new terminal. And it's built. Now there is a little bit of loading when you're working in dev right there, but like just the speed of the whole thing, it took, the Vite client 1500 milliseconds and Nitro built it in 380 milliseconds. Like I would fire up one of our current apps right now that takes like 2 to 3 minutes, to fire up. And if you do anything in the package, it just screws everything out. You got to rebuild the whole thing. Like it just takes forever. So the optimization that they're building in Nuxt 3 is just beautiful. Now I do wish some of these features would kind of come to just Vue 3 in and of itself. But I think they've got a really great direction where they're going with Nuxt 3, and there's lots of resources out there. If you have any questions, come talk to me. But yeah, that's about it. Go get a drink. Get out of here.